different lessons today. I was going to go a little bit heavier on the just general material as opposed to individual games today. But overall, I have a bunch of different things that I'd like to take a look at. I wanted to start off with I don't know if you guys have seen the schedule order, but basically I wanted to take a look at things slightly off of the order that I had published. I wanted to take a look at first starting with the black response to the English. I think basically, the black response to the English is interesting. There's two main forks here, and there's a number of other sub openings as well. Basically, with white starting off c4, black has two main responses that are centered around generally e5 or c5. Knight f6, I would say, basically goes into a different type of opening. Hey, good morning, Aphelion. Thank you very much for joining the stream. But yeah, so there's a number of options here for black. The most aggressive is considered to be e5. Knight f6 has the largest chance of transposing into a queen's pawn opening with d4, g6, d5, and basically c5 is the symmetrical English. These are the openings that tend to be the most commonly played. I think objectively these are the best. There are also some small sidelines. I mean, you can always play a flank opening against c4. It makes a less aggressive attempt for the center. And yeah, I mean, basically, yeah. Good morning, Aphelion. Thanks for being here. But yeah, this basically is an interesting situation. I wanted to take a look at c4, e5 a little bit more today. I think basically this offers the best chances for a black advantage. This is probably a good way for black to play. And I think unless you have a good reason, and also because we've already covered the symmetrical English in an earlier point, e4 or c4, e5, provides the best attacking lines for black. You'll end up having moves like bishop c4, knight c6, d6, bishop f5. It'll end up having some similarities to both the Sicilian with the colors reversed, and also has some similarities to king's pawn openings. White can end up playing e4 as well, but basically c4, e5 I think provides the best winning chances for black against the English. Knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, knight c6. And basically here, the knights have developed symmetrically. This is the English four knights. Basically some fairly good opening play here. G3, d5, c takes, knight takes, bishop g2. And I think basically black is looking relatively comfortable. Lines of development will include bishop to c5, e6. Things look pretty healthy. Castles, and I think it'll probably be a good chance for black to equalize and potentially start attacking. These games are interesting. Black has better center control. White has a slight advantage in development, and it's relatively even and very competitive. So here I guess I would say a3. I mean, basically we're sort of playing through standard developing moves. I want to play through these kind of quickly. White has plans with queenside expansion, and what I'm hoping for is in the main lines this will show the play start to get directed towards the king side. In this particular game, in this particular line, it looks like the the attack ends up being entirely on the queen side. Both sides are kind of maneuvering on the queen side. That can happen too. But yeah, it's an interesting game. c4 leads to some Sicilian-like rook c1 moves, expansion on the queen side, and overall, I think basically, it poses a good challenge to to black. It can be very solid. The lines that transpose into d5, tend to favor white. They tend to have, especially if you play something along the lines of like the Grunfeld against 1c4, that ends up being a situation in which white has favorable aspects of the Grunfeld, but black has less, or basically white has played less committal moves than the standard Grunfeld, and that can often be slightly better for white. c4, e5 is interesting. I guess we can take a look at the c4, e5, g3 line. In this line, it's similar to the Sicilian. Basically, in this line, the Sicilian's going to have this long bishop diagonal, and basically, black's going to do what he can to sort of push this attack forward. Often, more one of the main common lines in the Sicilian, or in the English opening, symmetrical Sicilian, is with g3, g6. This also ends up being pretty solid for black. Knight c3, knight b6, knight f3. Basically, this ends up being pretty solid, pretty good play for black against white. Bishop e7, d3, castles. I like black's general position here. Black has fairly good control of the center. Ideas like bishop e6, bishop f5, bishop g4 are all playable. And here, yeah, you're basically black is choosing where to develop his bishop. Bishop e6 is probably the best. This controls this b3 square, and white's expanding on the queen side. Black will probably try to match on the queen side here. I like moves like a5. A5 is responded to by b5, and now white can play knight to d4. And knight takes e5 is kind of interesting here. I guess the downside of that is potentially bishop f6 attacking the bishop or attacking the rook, bishop e6. This is not a basically I want to go through and get back to this opening line just to see how this kind of happened, but this ends up being pretty solid for this ends up basically being pretty solid for black. I think the eval is going to be equal or slightly better for black here, and I think with the move like bishop to b3, black has definitely made his way into white territory. Knight d2 prevents bishop to b3. Bishop f5, bishop f6, ideas securing this dark squared diagonal, dark squared fianchetto diagonal could be good for black. But here I guess I would just say it's kind of an interesting game. Maybe a4 here, bishop takes c6, b takes c6, and I think it's really a solid position. I don't think either side is way up here. Maybe black's a little bit better. These pawns aren't really going to be advanced anywhere. And sort of interesting, just general c4, e5 structures. They lead to play on the queen side, and I don't know, interesting. More attacking lines, more open game for black relative to c4, c5, and that I think that poses a good general way of playing against the English. Ideas, I don't know. Knight c3 and g3 are by far the two most common moves here. We can look at the knight c3 line. I have a feeling that this is going to look relatively similar to the g3 line, basically transposing into a later g3 as opposed to an earlier one. This challenge on d5 is good, and I don't know. I mean, again, a relatively good attacking game. White gets better development, black tends to get better center control, and that's kind of thematically what's going on in c4, e5. It tends to be an open where basically, I don't know. I mean, you basically get good attacking lines in the center for black. White has a slight lead in development, and it has some characteristics to the Sicilian, where basically, white gets a slightly better center, but black gets a good attack on the queen side. That tends to be, the same general concept with colors reversed here. Here, I don't know. I guess expansion on the queen side. There's going to be very few lines that don't involve expansion on the queen side. White has a number of different moves at his disposal. He has rook b1, he has knight b5, he has queen c2. But it's really like a Sicilian type minority attack, right? Like basically this looks like the a6 b5 attacks in the Sicilian. Ideas like queen d7 I think can be good. Knight d4, if it can be held, would be a good outpost for that knight. But black's got better center control. White's got this attack on the queen side, and I don't know. I mean, the intuitive response in the Sicilian is to start an attack on the king side. That doesn't seem to be as much of a focus in the c4, e5 lines, but I don't know. I guess that extra tempo for black means that a king side attack would be that much more difficult. But yeah, anyways, knight d4, knight d2. I think all this is going to transpose to be relatively good for black, relatively equal. That said, c4 is definitely like a playable opening. There's many situations where black, ends up with equality, but that doesn't mean that it's not a good opening to play. We can take a look at some of the Grunfeld lines where it's particularly favorable, like knight f6, knight f3, g6, knight c3, and then d5 here. This is basically trying to turn the English into the Grunfeld. And here, knight takes d5, basically white doesn't play this normal e4 move, and an exchange on c3 is not nearly as favorable for black as it is in the Grunfeld. The Grunfeld still ends up being slightly better for white, but like the take on c3, pawn takes c3, and the big pawn center that white gets tends to be good for white in the Grunfeld, but black can quickly establish an attack with c5, bishop g7, knight c6, and basically have a lot of piece play against white's larger center. So this is the Anglo Grunfeld, I guess they call it, and bishop d7, queen h4, knight c3. This is overall good. No real issues for white. Black's development is a little bit awkward. White can play things like bishop e3, rook d1, exert pressure on this open file. It ends up being relatively good for white. e5 is an idea, but there's a few different choices for black here, and e5, bishop to e7. This looks good. I think there's not really much of a problem with black's play here. So yeah, interesting. Turns into a game. You can play the Grunfeld against the English opening, I guess, is my main point. And yeah, overall, multiple different types of ways you can respond to the English. I've looked at the symmetrical English before, but I just want to play into basically show like the full symmetrical English lines where there's the basically the full symmetry. Knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, knight c6, fully symmetrical g3, g6. And basically, black can play almost entirely symmetrically until white plays d4. On d4, I think the main response is d6. C takes d4 is also sometimes played. In terms of analysis, I'm sort of curious. d5 is actually getting a pretty good eval here. I guess I would say of these choices, c takes d4 is the one that's the most consistent with theory. Knight takes, queen takes, d6, queen d3. Hey, good morning, Tarash. Thank you very much for joining the stream. Yeah, so here I guess a6, and basically you're holding together kind of this position. You've transposed, you basically entered a playable game from the opening. This is about equal, and really now you just sort of have to play chess. Bishop f4 is getting suggested by the engine, which is a little surprising to me. I feel like bishop f4 runs into e5, although that makes the d6 pawn backwards. But yeah, I think this is all good. I would play a quicker b5 here. Like this line looks good to me. C takes, knight takes, bishop f5, and then threats on this b5 pawn. But I think basically this ends up being pretty solid. Yeah, I mean black. This is an interesting position. These pawns are connected and passed. That's dangerous for black. Materials equal. Black's bishop is slightly better. This is sort of an interesting simplified way out of the symmetrical English. I want to go back to an earlier part of this line, but anyways, I think it is a bigger part of the picture here. I think this should give some insight into the ideas behind playing different openings as black against the English. There's basically a number of different ways that black can play it. Knight f6, c5, e5, and a delayed d5 are all different general strategies that black can play against the English. In terms of getting attacked as black, the English doesn't make as many aggressive plays for the center as d4 or e4. It's basically similar to the Sicilian with colors reversed. The main play from black in the English is intuitively or the main play from white in the English is d4, the same way that d4 is the main point of black's focus in the Sicilian. d5 is the main point of focus for white in the English in the center. So yeah, you can do Queen's Indian setup. That's an idea for sure. You can play into a lot of different situations that are similar to known queen's pawn openings. I briefly went over the Grunfeld just in the first 5 minutes here. Queen's Indian can be done. Modern can be done. Perk, all those kind of flank openings. You can definitely do those too against the c4, like you pretty much can against any opening. or any first move for white. But yeah, the main ideas in the English tend to revolve around c5, e5, or d5. And when d5 is not played as an immediate d5, it's played as knight f6, and then d5 on moves somewhere between moves 2 and 5. It's a good opening. I mean, basically, it's solid for white. If you're a Sicilian player, it might be worth looking at. It has a lot of the same similar themes, including play on the queen side, and yeah. Rubinstein French. I mean, I don't know that. I don't know that opening extremely well. The pawn structure for Rubinstein French, I don't know. I'm not a French player, but it's a good question. You could ask. I mean, I don't know the answer to that. Is the yeah. But anyways, Rubinstein French is not one of the ones that I know. It's possible, I've probably seen it. I'm not super good with the names. Anyways, I was thinking of taking a look also at some GM games from Candidates 2014, and I think those are pretty interesting. There's basically a bunch of, there's a bunch of games here, highest level games. GM games got requested. My ability to add value to GM games is pretty limited. Chess is one of those sports where, people, it's sort of tricky to play at GM level, or to demonstrate GM level play. The fact of the matter is, if you're not at IM or GM level, the insights that you can provide on GM level play is relatively limited. I feel like a lot of people kind of try not to be too straightforward about that. But the truth of the matter is, Grandmasters, International Masters are significantly better than National Masters. That is the case. I'm very happy to own that. I just wish, and I hope that others will as well. Anyways, moving forward on this, I wanted to take a look at GM games. We can play through them. We can say that they're pretty. We can say that they're very efficiently done, but in terms of providing good insights, these GM level games are played at such a high level that whether I'll come up with the correct interpretation of how you're setting up a positional attack 10 moves in, I'm not so sure I can do that. Anyways. d4, c4, knight f6, e6, and basically this is the game between Indrakin at 2700 and Kramnik at 2785. Yeah, no, totally, Smiggy. Here's some instructional games. Are you saying that I should? I'm not interested in playing at all. To be completely honest, I don't play. This basically, is a lesson stream. There's many different chess streams available where people are playing games, but this is a lesson stream. I mean, the goal here is not really even to make it a stream. It's really just to make sure that chess lessons become free and available to everyone, that we can. So I don't particularly want to play. I appreciate that you're interested, but I don't think I'm the right stream for you. Yeah, no. I think there's many people who show games that they play. But what really differentiates this stream is the fact that we are, my goal here is really just to transform the chess lessons and chess tuition business model. I want to make lessons free and accessible to everyone and given at a high level. I want to demonstrate that master level chess lessons are free. They should be free. And that I think is really the goal here. But anyways, thank you for asking, Smiggy. I just think I'm not the right person for you on that one. Anyways, knight c3, bishop b4, queen c2, castles, and basically this is a this is an early Nimzo-Indian defense. So bishop b4, queen c2, castles, a3, bishop takes, queen takes c3, d5. And this is the general. I would not do that, Tarush, but it's an interesting question. Yeah, that's great. That's great, Smiggy. I'm very happy to hear that. Yeah, no, I think the way that you can do, you can generate pretty quick improvement is through tactical play. I think it's one of those things like, I can't help and a teacher can't help, but the biggest differentiation between chess players is really the work that they do on their own. I can provide some insight on. That's funny. Remind me to play that against you, Tarash. That's yeah. I mean, yes, you didn't want to play that game, so that's all right, cool. But yeah, the real goal is just basically the truth of the matter is, teachers provide very limited value. They in chess. They can steer you in the correct direction, but the hard work is going to have to be done by you. I mean, no, people are studying chess 5 hours a day, and the thing about that is that they're not doing that 5 hours with the teacher on the clock. I mean, the teachers are really used as a steering tool and not as something that's actually that helpful in getting people to improve. So I don't want to say, I really appreciate that I really appreciate it, Smiggy, that you feel like I've been helpful. But the truth of the matter is, I was barely helpful at all. All that work that you did was the work that you did. The teacher didn't add any value. I gave you some guidance, but the hard work was done by you. So I don't want to take any credit where it's not due. And I think basically the point of what I'm saying is the teachers add, the work is done by you. So I can try to add value where I can, and I can try to make explanations, but you should take credit for your success. Because the success was on your part and not mine. But I'm glad to hear that you're improving, and I am happy to hear that things are going well for you. If you I guess basically if you if you study tactics somewhere between 1200 and 2000, you are the one putting in that time. You are the one improving, and the teacher that told you to do that could be helpful. But the value of the teacher in that general equation was very little. So anything else would be misrepresentation. Anyways, yeah, good. I'm glad. Really happy to hear. Hanging Pawn's middle game playlist, and yeah, no, thank you guys. So that is all. That's basically that's it on that topic. So yeah. So going, very happy to hear that you're improving, Smiggy. Keep up the good work. Really happy to hear that, and nicely done. But yeah, so let's look at this game. This is the Nimzo Indian. It's an interesting opening. Basically doesn't involve the immediate challenge of d5. d5 will be played in this opening. This e6 is supporting d5 as soon as d5 is played. But bishop e4 comes before d5, and that's one of the things that defines it as the Nimzo Indian. In terms of common openings here, this is all very sound, very well-established stuff. Kramnik is, a big fan of the Nimzo Indian. He likes these types of openings. Bishop g5, bishop b7, f3, h6, bishop h4, and d5 is really the way to continue to move this forward. Basically now black has relatively good center control. These pawns are symmetrical. The c4 pawn is more advanced than the c7 pawn, but these ones are symmetrical. And basically, if you were to determine who has better center control here, it's not super clear. I mean, this queen is feeling somewhat stuck on c3, although, it's not causing any problems there. And basically, here, there's multiple different routes forward for black. c5 maintains the pawn structure symmetry. But in terms of considering who's better in the center, like this bishop controls a lot of squares. This development on d7 can be good. c6, c5. Overall looking good for black. So I don't know. Maybe knight d7, maybe queen c8, c5. Multiple plans. C takes, knight takes. This is aggressive. Looks like it loses a pawn, doesn't it? Maybe it's counting? No, I guess it stays even. This is a sideline. Let's go back to the game. The game is interesting. Nimzo Indian, bishop takes c3, queen takes, d5 challenging the center. And here black plays a move that isn't the most, or I didn't think this was the most common. D takes c4, queen takes c4, Queen is on c4, not easily attacked. Ideas can come up with a5, knight d7, knight b6, and c6. So here, black is expanding on the queen side. The c-pawn, this fractured pawn structure, this is interesting. G takes. I think black can basically try to move this, basically move this forward. In terms of space, black has a big spatial advantage. This file is open. This diagonal is open. This pawn structure is worse. So let's look at this game for like strategies. This is an open file on the queen side. This queen is playing into there, establishing an attack on b2. This pawn structure is weak, but not necessarily super attackable for white, and given that it's a GM game, I'm sure there's no immediate vulnerabilities. Rook to d8 is probably good. A rook to d8 is probably good. Black could try ideas that involve e5 and knight to e4, trying to get the knight posted on e4. C4 maybe. Hey, thank you very much for the follow, VChess. I really appreciate it. But yeah, I would say c4 here. C4, and then this is somewhat secured. The pawn risks overextension, but I think practically speaking, you can play c4, followed up with knight to a5. But I'm sure that all these ideas are extremely superficial relative to I'm pretty sure all these ideas are relatively superficial compared to what they were coming up with in the GM level game that was played. King h8, so queen is capitalizing, queen is leaving the queen side in order to put pressure on this king. The queen can now make some direct threats with queen to h4. I'm not sure if that's the most efficient, but actually that looks like it wins that does sort of look like it wins a pawn, or gets close. King g7, I think, is forced. But yeah, another sideline. This one is fairly similar. And yeah, it looks basically about even. It was an agreed draw in the situation. Let's play through it again. In terms of looking at it, I think one of the things that is valuable about GM games is that they teach very solid opening lines. If you can see a GM versus GM playing an opening line, you know that that opening line is not refuted. So if you can just emulate GM opening lines to move 10, that can provide a guideline that those opening lines are consistently good. I guess I would say there that it's not a good idea to just memorize opening lines for the sake of memorizing opening lines. Yeah, let's take it to the end, Willem, and look at this position. Black has 5 pawns, so the rook's gonna. All right, so the rook's gonna take this one first, right? I mean, that's the move. So I think they're projecting equality in a drawn game with rook takes c5 having been projected, right? So now black is, my guess would be that black offered the draw, right? So the game ends on e takes d5, knowing that rook takes c5 is going to be played. Now is it so clear as black being better? Like, I don't know. His pawn structure is a little bit more fractured. This is 4 pawns versus 4 pawn islands versus 2. This pawn is passed and distant, but I'm guessing that this is probably yeah, no, completely agree, Tarash. And I think that with ideas behind the chess openings by Fine, you can basically learn the ideas behind each of the openings individually without really having to go much into the technical theory of it at all. Ideas behind the chess openings by Fine, I think, is great, yeah, solid. I think that that's a pretty good book to just read through and gain a much better understanding of chess. It won't materialize for you, as you're reading it, but often you can draw on the ideas in that book and know that you've done something that's been very correct or incorrect based on the principles in that book. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I also am a big fan of that theory, Tarash. I think if you just read through the book and don't worry as much about the precise memorization, that can be a really good way to learn opening themes. I think that's right. The one that I'm talking about, Ideas Behind the Chess Openings by Fine, is basically an opportunity to do that. Hey, welcome, Fortunate. Thank you very much for joining the stream. No, not much. Just running through the openings for today and trying to add some value. But yeah, this is thank you very much, Fortunate Son. Yeah, thank you for joining the stream. But yeah, so one of the things that one that I learned when I was trying to figure this out is that there's actually a GitHub here. It's in chess Rosim user Rosim chess data. There's a lot of different PGNs here. I assume that they're all. I assume that they're all fine. I think basically, these are just PGNs that the guy has compiled by himself. But very interesting material. And here, this candidates24.pgn was what I was drawing from. This is a great, opening book here. This was that full tournament. But yeah, there's value in chess.com for sure. But if you can get a free copy of at least a trial copy or a lightened copy of ChessBase, and you can just load in the PGNs here and have your own database sets. I'm old, so I'm very familiar with ChessBase and kind of the the old classic database management that went into working with ChessBase. This looks like a pretty good GitHub to get to use for that. Wasn't aware that this existed until I searched for this chess data. But yeah, that's interesting. Chess.com may have more user-friendly libraries. I look back to time spent working with chess-based databases, so that is yeah. But anyways, a lot of great chess data there, and GitHub is a somewhat novel place to look for chess data, but in this particular case, it seemed to work. Cool. Interesting. Thank you very much for suggesting that. Game. And I guess what I sort of wanted to go into here, and I kind of wanted to do this on the fly, but I wanted to use this game in order to transition into the concept of rook and pawn endgames. So I appreciate Willem bringing up this concept of what's better and what's worse in these rook and pawn endgames. This one's pretty much on the complicated side. This is tricky. I mean, the GMs have evaluated this as a draw, but I think this is a good opportunity to sort of play through it. I want to look through how can black plausibly misplay this, or how can white plausibly misplay this? Is this just a draw, or is this really or are there legitimate winning chances for black? Willems raised a super interesting question, and I want to start my conversation on rook and pawn endgames based on this endgame here. So yeah, Willem asked the question: is this a win for black, given that it's white to move here and white's going to play rook takes c5? I don't know. It's interesting. Let's see what white's misplays are. The engine immediately plays a move that I think is going to move things in the drawing direction. Let's say e takes d4, rook b4, and each move here I'm going to see basically what the engine suggests as white and then not play it. So say rook d5, king e7. I'm just wondering if black can play this so badly that or white can play this so badly that black will win. This is a pretty good demonstration. I do have one funny thing on the topic of accuracy, and just since this lesson's a little bit loose, I just want to show you guys this game, which I thought was really funny on the topic of accuracy. I played the USCF tournament last night, and I thought that was. I usually play it. I think it's really interesting, and I managed to play this game, which is 97.6 for me and 98.1 for my opponent. Okay. And I know I'm diverging from the lesson, the rook and pawn lesson. But if you get 97.6 for you and 98.1 for your opponent, how did this happen? And the answer is it's a ridiculously long game, which I didn't even know that. Which I didn't even know that this changes the accuracy, but it does. Because I guess at the end of the game, this ends up being like basically you're playing best moves at the end of the game, 95% of the time. So if it's just all best moves, right? This is pretty crazy. So looking at this accuracy here, the game basically ends at move, I don't know, 40, 45, 50. Somewhere around here, it trades off into a very interesting endgame. And then basically from move 45 to move 125, we were all both playing best moves. So here, there's basically no volatility at all. So this is averaging into 100% accuracy right here. And because of that 100% accuracy, a game which was, imperfectly but relatively accurately played gets these crazy accuracy scores. I didn't exactly know that this could happen, but this is actually pretty interesting. Just in terms of using accuracy as an overall metric, this game shows something that's pretty interesting here, which is that these accuracy scores can be influenced by variables that are not necessarily like super obvious. I'll just play through the game. It's not a very good game. It's just sort of junky game where I messed up and managed to grind out a win and a draw in the end game. But I think more. I think it went 141 moves of Helion. But yeah, it was a crazy game. Kind of supported the idea of not resigning. Hey, good morning, Inch. Thank you for joining the stream. But yeah, I guess what I was curious about is, you never think of accuracy as being anything but determining kind of how, how close to computer play it is. But there's other variables that go into, this. Hey, thank you very much for the follow, Coding. I appreciate it. But basically, you never think of accuracy as being influenced by general, as anything besides how close to computer play you are. But it actually must be positively correlated with length of game. So I sort of wonder if in like a rook and knight, like an endgame that was king and rook versus king and knight, where both players are playing super accurately for 50. Yeah, I think so, right? For 50. Thank you very much for joining the stream, Willem. But if where both players are playing very accurately for 50 moves, what I sort of wonder here is whether or not that whether or not those accuracy scores are going to get jacked up in that one too. Because here, I mean, I'm sort of, maybe I can export this as a PGN and look at the thing before everything got traded off. So actually here, let's take a look. I'll download the PGN, right? And look to this game both as up to move, basically as up to move, say, 50 or something. Like, let's see where everything got traded off. So I would say everything's pretty reasonably traded off in this game at, like, this point. Okay, so I was lucky enough to win this one as white, which is sort of silly, but my opponent was playing queen and two minor pieces versus queen and one minor piece, and that happens on move 61. So what I'm sort of curious about here is what the accuracy score was up to the end of move 61, and what the accuracy score was up to the end of move yeah, no, right, exactly. Engine eval is kind of, there's other variables here. Like, I'm sure what this implies is that accuracy is positively correlated with length of game. So in this game, right, we each got really high scores on accuracy. The scores were 97.6 to 98.1. Interesting. So let's take a look at this and say what happens with an analysis that only goes to move 61, and it's the same exact game. And I can show you from move 61, we're basically screwing around on this extremely flat line for a good solid, I guess, another 80 moves or so. But a lot of just bouncing around, a lot of best moves, nothing really happens. It trades into bishop and queen versus queen. And it just looks like this. It's just a whole bunch of moves, and we're playing in time pressure, and I'm trying to flag them and stuff. And I actually make an error here. I actually hang my queen at one point, which I thought was pretty funny. Here, I played bishop to f4, which is a double question mark, and actually gave my opponent queen to h8, skewering my king and queen. I was lucky enough that he missed it, but I should have lost this game after queen to h8 here. That said, it was like time pressure, so it's very hard to play these accurately. So both I allowed queen h8 and my opponent missed queen h8, but that actually would have won the game for black here. I was lucky enough that I won the game as white a few moves later, but that is interesting. No, I'm just interested in thinking about how these issues work, but yeah, anyways, I made a fatal error in this one. My opponent missed it, and I was lucky enough to win. But what I'm interested in looking at here is if we import on if we import here on the up to move 61, which is when the minor pieces got traded off. So basically we had this game, a whole bunch of stuff happens. It's not a particularly good game. I hang a piece or something bad, and then end up with basically, I don't know, a bad position, very bad position actually, and I'm lucky enough to win it. So we trade into that, and then but up to move 61, the accuracy on this game was actually only 87.5 to 89.7, right? So it's basically exactly the same game. But because it went so long, and because so many best moves were played going into this late end game, this accuracy, which had been 87.5 to 89.7 after 70 moves of nothingness, turns into 97.6 and 98.1. So that's just something to consider. We really didn't play that accurate a game, especially me. But going into this late end game, there just weren't that many different possible moves that could be played. And even if we were playing second best moves, they usually weren't fatal, so they were getting evaluated as excellent, maybe not best, but excellent or good or great or whatever the engine says. But basically, with the length of the game going up, the accuracy scores go up as well, which is interesting. I mean, I guess I have a kind of something of a programming background, a development background, and a data analysis background. So when I see something like this, I'm like, that's pretty interesting. This is, I don't know. It basically shows that there are other variables at play other than just accuracy score in getting this top line accuracy rating. But interesting stuff. Just something to think about. My rook endgame lecture was kind of whatever. I didn't really have a great thing prepared, and I was going to sort of muscle through that Andrakin Kramnik game. But anyways, just since we were on the topic of accuracy, I thought this was sort of an interesting chess-related topic, where basically the identical game. I mean, you can see these bars basically represent where the game was competitive, or the game was not simplified. And then this same game, same exact bars with 80 moves of just random queen and minor piece maneuvering, goes from an accuracy of 87.5 to 97.6, or 89.7 to 98.1. But yeah, pretty interesting. Just something to think of in terms of accuracy. If you're interested in looking at, I'm actually I'm interested in enrolling in this machine learning program in the relatively near future. Just something interesting to think about when you're evaluating the metrics by which the top line accuracy score is calculated. Um, Anyways, just thought that was cool. Thought might be more interesting than rook and yeah, I thought it might be more interesting than the rook and pawn technical endgame. I'm pretty bad at those anyways, to be completely honest. But I thought this was an interesting basically I don't know, evaluation of metrics versus actual play. Yeah, thanks, Tarash. I hope that wasn't too boring or too technical, but I thought that was an interesting general idea there. Anyways, on to the games. We have 3 games from Coach, Electric Horse, and Pravilo. And let's take a look at Electric Horses. His is first. All right. Cool. So, Electric Horse, I think, is playing this one as black, if I remember everyone's username correctly. Yeah, so here, black plays the semi-Slav. Semi-Slav, d4, d5, c4, e6 is usually pretty solid. I didn't know that. I didn't know that, Anch, but maybe. But I think, yeah, the Monster Knight is eccentric horse, I believe, or electric horse. So I wanted to get to his game, but yeah, this should be interesting. D4, D5, C4, E6. This pawn structure tends to be pretty solid for black and tends to be, good, except for the point that this bishop runs into this E6 pawn. Here, knight F3, knight F6. Development is normal. Knight c3, c6, and now basically black has the semi-Slav structure. We spent a little bit of time talking about that. We talked about this yesterday. This structure tends to be very solid for black. Difficult to go wrong with the structure. Sorry, my camera blinked out for a second. Yeah, so basically this structure for black tends to be pretty good. If you look, yeah, the triangle is good. Triangle is solid, and basically I was looking at this. So it had been a while since I looked at this this chess structures game. I'm gonna pull this up just for a second. There's basically this chess structures book that I added to my recommendations list yesterday. And they talk about this triangle structure, and they specifically talk about the triangle structure with the d5 pawn having traded off for the c4 pawn. But if you actually look at chapter 4 of the chess structures book that I recommended, I don't know the rhombus attack, and I don't know the rhombus attack, and the and I don't know the I don't know that the yeah. But yeah, these end up being pretty interesting things. The Slav formation though is addressed in the chess structures book by Rios that I recommended yesterday. They've got basically really good. It's a really good. I'm just looking at it because I pulled it up. I pulled up the book on my phone. I have basically there's a set here where they talk about white's plans and they talk about black's plans, and they do this for every major opening. And I think that is really just something that's very helpful to read through. It's similar to ideas behind the chess openings. It just reads like a book. You don't really have to come up with much. You don't have to have a board in front of you or technical knowledge. But yeah. So this this basically this structure is solid and playable. I don't know. I mean, I think you can. This basically idea, this f7, e6, d5, c6, b7. It's solid. There's just not much of a way for white to get in. Usually the things that white can try to do, he could try to play e4, which would probably trade off, so it's not really that practical, like e4, e5. He could try to play c5, but that's usually pretty effectively undermined by b6. It ends up being a good structure. I like this as black. You know, you will have problems with your light squared bishop, but particularly if the pawn takes on d5, you can take with d5 and develop your bishop to the normal best developing square. So here, bishop takes, queen takes, e3, knight d7, bishop d3, and basically black I think is looking pretty good. This is where it transposes into what they call the Slav formation in this chess structures book. D takes c4, b takes c4, and you have this, you basically have this open space where the lead pawn had been. But you still have a relatively solid position. You have a little bit more danger there in terms of there might be opportunities for white to get posted on e4 or to play e4 as a pawn advance and get a big center. But this is generally how this, this is often how this turns out. When bishop plays to d3, pawn takes c4, bishop takes c4, and this ends up being reasonably good for black, and but white's still better, but reasonably good for black. It's just a playable game, playable middle game. It's going to involve normal middle game principles. So yeah, this is transposes into the Slav. Here c6 goes unplayed. So this is Queen's Gambit, basically orthodox, or the old classical Queen's Gambit. No c6 being played. That's not, I don't know. I'm a big fan of the Slav, and I'm a big fan of playing c6. The reason why is because I don't think that knight to c6, which is really the only move that c6 disrupts, is really that great an idea. There are specifics that come into play that become more playable in an orthodox structure. Those are knight to c6 and then b6, bishop c7. But here I think basically this this ends up being pretty much, I guess I would say pretty much good for pretty much good for black, despite white having this aggressive attack. Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea. I was just trying to calculate it out. This pawn takes g5 is not that awesome for white. This is not a sound sacrifice. I just want to go through this here, but this is out of the orthodox. I think we're still going to be an opening book pretty comfortably. Castles, e3, h6, fine. And here, but here basically you've divided into something that's completely no. I think it's funny. I think that's funny. That's funny, Tarash. Yeah. Hey, welcome, Dennis. Thank you very much for joining the stream. But yeah, so what I guess I would say here is, in this opening, when you play h6, you're well within opening theory. This is the second most common move for black. But I think what should tip you off, and basically what I was suggesting in my analysis session, how to learn openings from probably 2 to 3 days ago, the study of soil, right? Isn't topology study of ground, study of soil, or something? Or study, I guess, study of mountains. Study of ground formation, I guess. But yeah, so this structure basically, h6, you're well within opening theory, and here you're deciding between that's pretty funny. I mean, I was never that great. I was not that great at technical math. Like, I stopped after calculus 2. I took statistics. I didn't take math that far though. I didn't take linear algebra even. But yeah. Anyways, this concept is big. So I wanted to just go through and look at the evals here. The ideas I think are I did not know that, Tarash, but that's an impressive piece of knowledge. Did not know that. Interesting. But yeah, so I'm thinking basically, white's deciding opening moves here. He's basically transitioning from the opening to the middle game. So I think what should be a really good tip, and a reason why you can't go with the sacrifice. I mean, there are definitely openings, and there is opening theory where bishop is sacrificed on g5 or bishop is sacrificed on g4. But basically here, the ideas I think that are best for white are the ones in the opening book. If you play bishop d3, the eval shifts against you by about 4 points. That should be a tip that it's probably not, something that should be in your opening repertoire. Here, I think, interesting knowledge. It's beyond me, man. But yeah, h6 and then bishop h4 is the most common. Bishop takes f6 is also playable. But using the criteria that I was talking about the other day, if you see a really big negative eval shift against you, and you see a move that isn't in the opening book, that's probably something that you should take out of your repertoire. So Chess Bia has had a basically Chess Bia has moved away from this. Basically this Chess Bia basically has played some moves that I think are pretty unsound in the opening and leaves black with good chances to win. Here, as black and as a general plan, I would try to trade off pieces. Your pawns are roughly the same. I mean, white, they basically both sides have kind of fractured pawn structures. White is up by 1 pawn. I would play something like rook h8 here. Trading off pieces, I think, is pretty clearly good for black. And I think if you can push that idea forward and simplify, you'll trade into a very favorable endgame. So I would go with rook h8. I think that's the most immediate threat for white, for black in terms of trading off. I think maybe bishop h4 could be good. Maybe rook h8 and then bishop h4. But if you can, you definitely want to force off the larger pieces here. b6, knight b7, knight c5. That looks good. And yeah, keep running this forward. But with that rook trade, and yeah, I think basically black is yeah. So basically black let white into his territory. Let's figure out how to not do that. So here, e5 I would already say is probably not my preferred move. Rook h8. Rook h8 is stronger. It basically threatens to trade off one of the biggest pieces, rook, a heavy piece. I think you can probably then move your queen to f8, knight to e8, but I think you really do need to be careful. You're up a piece here. You're up a piece to a pawn, and your eval is at about plus 3.5. So with that in mind, I guess I would say that you probably shouldn't play things that are basically you shouldn't play things that are risky. You can play pretty conservatively, and if you give away half a pawn here and the eval shifts from 0.3 to 3 or 3.5 to 3, like that's actually just fine for you. Bishop to b4, okay. King f1. But again, I think closing the position to really prevent opportunities for white to attack it should be the strategic priority here. Like queen e8, queen f7, I think is good. But yeah, as soon as this sort of falls, it's basically as soon as the h pawn or the h, this was the big, in my mind, this was the big error. This queen d5. This really just lets white in on multiple places. It lets the white in through the h rank for the queen, and it lets the rook in through the d rank for the rook. So these together, I think, create basically say queen takes d5 is not a good idea. The real trouble comes up a few moves later. Basically by this point, after knight takes f5, things are going much worse for black. But there were just too few pieces over here. That was really that was kind of the overarching like strategic error there. So how do you basically how do you improve on this? I don't know. Rook h8 is good. Queen f8 is good, but I would definitely move towards closing lines off here. I don't know if c5 is ever tactically playable. I don't know. Maybe maybe b6, bishop a6 could be good, and overall here, moving your rook to challenge the rooks on these open files is a much better play. c5, sure. Yeah, I mean, you have to be careful to not let your bishop get stuck. But I don't know. Rook h8 probably. Yeah. But anyways, it ends up trading off into a draw, and basically, I think you're basically good. I think there's no real problems as black here, or sorry, I think there's no real problems as black here in the late middle game. But letting the pieces in was definitely something that should be avoided. Queen h8 here, not queen takes d5, bishop d7, bishop d7, rook c8. There's two basically open lines at this point from white into the black, the black position. And I think white would do a lot better if he prevents both of those. I think you can effectively do that. I think you do it with bishop d7, rook c8, and to block off the c file, and queen h8 to block off the h file. White's going to try not to trade. That's not surprising. But I think you can force more pieces off the board and help to improve your king safety. Black never really, basically black never really allows, letting white into that position here was an issue. So, the ideas probably should be allow this, don't allow this, these pieces into this position. But yeah, no, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, white gets very good attacking chances against his, white gets good attacking chances a piece down here. I guess probably the best situation is just to close things up. Bishop f8, bishop d7, and basically opportunities. Yeah, this king g7 is I think a good way to this king g7 has poor king safety, which leads to an unusual amount of opportunities for white being down material. Bishop d6, queen h8. Yeah, that's fine. But black should win this. So I would say more effort on trying to close the position to potential attacks, and more effort in terms of in terms of trading pieces off. Queen f7 here looks pretty tempting. I don't know what happens after knight g5. That looks a little bit dangerous for black, but like a pretty, just a conservative move like, bishop to c5 is fine. Knight to c6 is fine. But yeah, just generally close up this position. And simplify. These pawns should provide you a winning edge, so even if you traded off all the minor pieces here, basically if you lost a piece back here, but maintained your ace pawn and b pawn, black would probably win. So here, I would just say more effort into trading off pieces. This bishop needs to be defended practically now because of this discovery, but yeah, bishop to c5 should be fine. Knight to c6 should be fine, and the goal is to really just trade everything off and win in the endgame. Anyways, very interesting game. Thank you very much for sending it, Eccentric Course, and please keep sending them. always super helpful. I get to work, ahead a lot better if I get a lot of games and a lot of things to look at. So yeah, thank you very much. Cool. So call me Coach playing white, and let's look at the position here. Basically white is, again, another thing I think Coach did that was great, which was, he gave me kind of good guidelines of what to look at here. He wants to look at the isolated queen pawn. Yeah, that's a good guideline. We can look at that isolated queen pawn for sure. Here, pawn takes, and white's basically better. Yeah. So here's, I would say e4 maybe. But yeah, so here's the situation where this isolated queen pawn gets established. The engine's saying that you probably shouldn't have gone with e3. E3 to e4. With e4, you do get an isolated queen's pawn, and that ends up being pretty weak. The isolated queen's pawn, and that ends up being weakening. So pawn takes, knight takes, bishop takes. Basically, I think white is fine. Maybe bishop g2, maybe bishop f3. But white has some general ideas here that I think should be pretty solid. Maybe bishop to d3, because then knight can play to e4. But I like this general position. So yeah, white's looking solid now. Okay, so you're interested in looking at isolated queen's pawn. So the first thing I would think of is this is chapter 1 of this chess structures book that I'm now recommending. There's a whole chapter on the isolani, and I think that basically gives the the good ideas. So it says what are the plans playing with an isolani, which is what those are called, as white. So create a kingside attack. Break in the center with d4, d5 are the two most common plays, and I'm reading directly from the book. Like the book, one of the things that's good about this book, and is basically it says, it shows you a pawn structure, and then it says what are the two plans. Plan 1, create a kingside attack. Plan 2, break in the center with d4, d5, trading pawns and opening lines with an overwhelming initiative. Those are the two plans, two ideas there for white. So this game I think has both, or this game basically has both, right? E4 creates this isolated pawn. I'm not sure if that was necessary. I think basically here, you can play things like queen d3, f3, e4, and you'll have a solid pawn center here. Maybe bishop b2, maybe rook c1. You might as well improve your rook to c1 here. It's like a fully open file, so you want to be the first person to control it. Bishop to b2, queen d3, rook c1, and white's looking good on that file. Knight takes, bishop takes, and I think basically white's looking fine. And here's basically where this initiative, pushed the pawn forward from d4 to d5 with an overwhelming initiative, was exactly the phrase that the structures book recommends to play this idea. d4, pawn takes d4, bishop takes d4. The pawn center is simplified. The pawn structure is now symmetrical, and white does have an initiative here. The eval is still given as equal. I think that feels ungenerous to white. With bishop to g4, rook to c2, I think you basically can try to. I mean, basically with bishop to g4 or bishop to g5, rook to c2. In terms of advancing this, I don't know, rook to c2, queen to f5. But I'm surprised. I would figure that, white has much better center control here, both with this bishop and with this queen and with this bishop. I would figure white would be getting an eval edge here. Anyways, it's equal. Bishop g6, queen d5, hangs a piece, it looks like. Queen d5, wait, queen d4, queen takes, rook takes, and bishop to f6. And things are overloaded. Oh, this is what actually happened in the game. Yikes. Okay, cool. Yeah, so interesting, coach. Yeah, you've played a good game up until this point. Among other things, you managed to successfully play the main Isolani strategy from the book that I was reading, this chess structures book, this d4, d5 plan. With this, I think you get a good position. It's a late middle game position. You have the opportunity to attack both on the queen side and on the king side. You'll need to be careful, but I think you can be careful here. Both sides are, I guess white's a little bit more exposed, but both sides are sort of facing similar risks. Good question. Yeah, no, it may. That's actually a very good idea, Tarash. Maybe maybe the engine is just evaluating the game as being. Hey, welcome very much, Maria. Thank you very much for joining the stream. But yeah, so I think basically, the engine could be evaluating this all the way into the end. Bishop to g5, is a play for black. But yeah, it's possible that just the engine has this calculated very distantly into the future, and that's enough to provide the win. The engine knows that it's a draw, and it's a draw. That's a very possible explanation, Trosh. An interesting way to think about it. Bishop g6 gets played, and the right move here is queen f3. It has to be. After queen f3, this threat on b7 is becoming a lot more formidable. Like this threat basically gives white a +1 eval. That's sort of what I had expected in the previous situation, but I guess that's it. So yeah, queen d4 unfortunately hangs a piece. After this, white's in rough shape, and can try his best to win or draw down a full bishop, but overall this is looking pretty ugly. Yeah, bummer. But yeah, so in terms of improving this position, I think your game made sense. I think you can kind of ask questions about whether it was worth opening up the center, which is good, against the liability of having that isolated queen pawn. But you played the isolated queen pawn perfectly, exactly how the book, which I think is great, recommends. So when you did that, you basically ended up in a situation where you had better center control, and basically had a successful strategic execution when you play queen f3 here. The tactical, this is just a tactical oversight, unfortunately, and kind of a bummer, because you did many things right in this game, and the issue is, if you have a tactical error that can basically destroy 40 moves worth of good work. It's unfortunate, but the case. So really this game was played very well. I don't really have that much to offer you in terms of playing. I think you basically played things which were reasonably intuitive. Taking on the Isolani, I'm not sure is a good idea, but once you had it, you played it correctly. But if you have a 5-point swing due to a missed tactic, that's just really hard to. I mean, look, it's more. It's 6.5 points. Queen f3 here predicts a 2.2 advantage, and queen d4 predicts a 4.3 advantage. I mean, that's just better for that's just basically better for black, unfortunately. Bummer. I feel like you got a good position here with queen f3. You're up a lot, 2.21 or 1.3 or whatever the computer ends up at. But yeah, that's a bummer. Sure, yeah, Mariano. Thank you very much. We might have time for the end if you stick around, Mariano. I mean, it's just very relevant. It's like, in 50% of games, yeah, hang around till the end of the stream and I'll play you, Mariano. Um, but yeah, so if White had been able to, if White had been able to see Queen F3 over Queen D4, he would have been good. In this one, yes. Unfortunately, this is a great game that Coach sends me. Coach sends me great games, and one of the things that's great about Coach as well is that he he not just sends great games, but he sends games and gives very good suggestions about where he wants to look at things. He was talking about isolated queen's pawn play here, and this book, Chess Structures by Rios, gives two very solid plans on how to play Isolanis. It's in this book. It's very readable. It's not technical, and you played it right. That was plan 2. Break in the center with d4, d5, trading pawns and opening lines with overwhelming initiative. This is exactly the phrase in the book. And taking away from this game, Coach, I think you really you would do well with that idea, and you did it well in this game. So the idea, the isolated queen's pawn was played correctly, but ultimately the issue was this queen move, which lost 6.5 points. Just a tactical thing. If you do tactics for an hour a day for a month, you will improve. And I suggest that you go onto that regimen, because it's a bummer to lose a game that you've played this well. Anyways, thank you very much for sending it, Coach. Thank you. Please keep sending games, and please keep sending games with so much guidance on analysis. It really helps me. I can try to answer the questions that you have. And with that in mind, yeah, thank you for sending the game. Please keep sending them. Okay, this is Pravilo's game. I don't know if Pravilo sent this one in. Sorry, I know Pravilo sent this one in, but I don't know that he was playing this one. We'll take a look either way. Okay, Queen's Gambit accepted. That's interesting. Here, the main response is knight to f3 usually. But Queen's Gambit accepted is kind of an interesting opening. I mean, Queen's Gambit accepted is basically impossible to hold onto this pawn as black. Even if you allocate every resource as black to try to hold on to this pawn, very difficult to do. Knight f3, we'll just play through it. Knight c3, knight f6, e4, knight c6, and knight takes d4. And basically here, I think White's in a pretty good, White's in a pretty good place. Ideas include bishop to e3, knight f3, bishop takes f7, and g knight e2 sets up a trap. So I like knight e2 sort of because it's trappy here. On knight e2, if knight takes e2, you can play bishop takes f7 and win the queen. That's an idea. Yeah, I completely agree, Tarash, and that's why I would say for players between 1200 and 2000, probably it's not just that it can wipe out 40 good moves, it's that it frequently does. I mean, I would say that 50% of games at club level are determined by just a single tactical, error. So, in terms of making, lifting yourself out of club level, I think the best strategy is really just to study tactics and get yourself to the point where you're playing accurately. From a fundamental perspective, most people play reasonably correctly. Like, they develop their pieces, they, try to control the center, they try to increase the mobility of their pieces in the middle game. But, if you make tactical miscalculations, it's just, there's nothing that can really be done. You're basically losing a game where you had superior understanding. It's a bummer. So I would say that's a good way to go about it, and I think 1200 to 2000 tactical study should be 75% of your training. I mean, a really high percentage. So yeah, knight takes d4, e5 is sort of slow. Knight to e2 is interesting because it has that trap in it. E5, the issue with e5 is basically that it overextends this pawn and makes it difficult to defend. You can't comfortably play f4. I think this will open up your position up too much as white. But e5 becomes a liability when it's this far advanced. It's just dangerous and not well defended. Knight plays to g4. Here you technically give back knight takes e5 if you'd like. Or sorry, no, wait. Bishop's threatening e4, so you have to trade off the knight for the bishop or move the knight. And then here's the biggest error of the game: knight f5. So this is a situation again where we're talking about tactics. White is basically playing a white basically has a move here. A tactical win. And this is something that really needs to sort of be seen. In this situation, basically you have a great opportunity. With tactical study, you will see this move as white, and you will win this game. So the correct move here is bishop takes f7. The king can't continue to defend the d8 queen. Queen takes d8, and you're good. You're up by 9 points. This really should be a win for white. I think white's in a very good place with this. Instead, queen takes d8 is an error. You can still follow up with bishop takes f7 if you want and win that pawn. Castling is fine. Bishop takes f7 is good again. This game is very tactical, Privilo, and I think basically, I'll point towards tactical improvements for you, but the decisions here were not. And then what happened? Did the rook get hung? Well, you found this one, so okay. So this is a perfect demonstration. You're halfway there, but you're not fully there. So you play rook d1. And then the king is forced away from the defense of the rook. Great move. This wins the rook. So this is great. Great move. Rook d1 is a tactic that you saw. So tactic decided this game. And now I think you'll be able to close this out. Okay. Interesting. So this is really about tactics. So I'm just going to go through and show the different tactical improvements for white. First improvement, bishop takes f7, king takes f7, queen takes d8, wins the queen. Second improvement, here bishop takes f7, and then on knight takes e3, rook to d3, the knight has to go somewhere, so say f5, and then you can play bishop to e3, e6 and win the bishop. So that's another improvement here. Okay, this all looks fine. Well, so positional mistakes basically involve okay, and then this was the third basically big tactical opportunity. And then I think here rook takes f6 was forced. So rook takes f6, and then this pawn can't queen. But if you don't play rook takes f6 immediately, then the pawn does queen. Once it queens, black's in very good shape. Thank you very much for asking the question, Psychological. The question, or the answer to that is basically, a positional mistake is one in which provides you a sort of lasting positional disadvantage. So that can involve either less center control, that can involve a space disadvantage, that can involve opening lines of attack for your opponent. I'll try to find a positional mistake from this game, but basically, the positional mistakes are different than tactical mistakes. Often tactical mistakes involve direct loss of material. There is kind of an area where tactical play leads to positional advantages or disadvantages, where it's sort of like, is that a positional mistake or is that a positional play or a tactical play? That's sort of a complicated question. But I guess my question there is basically, does what can you do to or what can you do to make sure that something is purely positional or purely tactical? I feel like tactical is easier to define. Positional mistakes, I'll show you. but there's a tactical aspect of positional mistakes as well. So let's go back. We can take a look and see one from this game. Yes, that's a great example. Yeah, so if you have a knight and a bishop left, or so let's say or putting pawns on the same color as your opponent's bishop going into an endgame. You know that it's not going to lose material for you immediately, but it will lose it will lose material for you eventually. But it will provide a positional disadvantage in the short term. Putting pawns on the same color as your bishop is a great example. I can try to look at other ones here. This would be one if you go take a look at this. So in this game, bishop to b5 moves the bishop. So you have this tactical improvement. It's a very good question, Psychological, and I appreciate you asking it. Bishop takes f7 is hey, welcome, Pravilo. Good tactic, good rook d1 tactic here. I wanted to just take a look at this one. So this was really a good way of deflecting the king off of the defense of this rook here. So I wanted to make sure that I gave credit, and I really appreciate you sending this game in, Pravilo, and please keep sending them in. I know that we've kind of gone over it before. I think the biggest improvements to your game will come with good tactical play. But if you play rook to d1 here, this knocks this king off the defense of this rook. So here, rook to d1, king to c7, king takes e8, and basically white will be in good shape up a rook. You'll still need to play accurately to win, but this was a good tactic, a good thing that you found. You're right. If you play rook d1, the king can't defend this rook anymore. So that's that's going to end up being a win for white. So nicely done there, or close to a win for white. You still have to be very careful, but this should give white a win here, I think. So nice job, Pravilo. I assume you're playing white in this game, so good job in that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pravilo. But this is one that you sent in. But yeah, thank you guys. Very happy to be doing these streams, and hope it's helpful. So knight to c2. Here you have the opportunity to play rook takes f3. I think that was pretty important. But apart from the tactical stuff, I wanted to look more at kind of positional concepts, because Psychological was asking about that. What I was thinking in terms of advancing this position positionally, or what may or may not have been a good idea positionally, I think of this bishop move, bishop to b5. So this is a positional error. So the first thing is bishop takes f7 is objectively probably the best move. But let's forget that that's the best move for a moment, and let's just look at this move, bishop to b5 in isolation. So bishop to b5 is a positional mistake, and I think it's a positional mistake because it basically takes the bishop on from one diagonal, this diagonal, which has 7 squares, and puts it onto a diagonal that has 5 squares. So overall, that basically, unless you have a tactical reason behind it, that is a positional error. You're taking it from a big diagonal and putting it onto a small diagonal. That's not necessarily like the best idea. So the mobility of the pieces should be maximized, for sure. That's important. Limiting mobility of pieces unnecessarily is only going to be it's going to be basically a deadweight loss for you. I would definitely say bishop to b5 is a mistake, moving moving from a line of 7 to a line of 5. I guess I would say c6. So what's a positional issue about this as well is that this this c6 pawn blocks off. Basically this improves black's position. This c6 pawn doesn't win anything. It doesn't win any tactics. But bishop b5 is a positional mistake because it puts the bishop onto a worse diagonal, and it allows black to improve his position with c6. Now with c6, black has a positional advantage that he didn't before, which is he gets to play king c7. The c6 pawn also wins tempo, so the bishop either has to choose between going back to c4, which is kind of rough now because knight takes e3, or bishop to e2. But basically, over the course of one move, white has limited his chances. So I think in that respect, it's been a, it's a loss of a good diagonal for a slightly weaker diagonal, and it helped to move black's pieces forward. Generally, yes. I mean, the answer to that is there are other considerations. There's tactical considerations that are more important than that, Ahmet. But the issue with putting your bishop on the the goal is basically to put your bishops on the most active diagonals that you can. So yes, broadly that's true. That's why people fianchetto stuff. They play like g3 or g6, so they can get their bishop and put it on the longest diagonal. Right. Yeah, no, I think that's right, Tarash, and that makes sense. I mean, it's an intuitive move. Adding more attackers, is always good. But if it's yeah, no, for sure. But if it's, and I think it's a good idea. I mean, adding more attackers to a piece that's somewhat vulnerable is good. Hey, thanks for sending the game, Ahmet. I'll add that game for May 14th. Tomorrow. So I'm adding that game for tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. Thank you for sending it, Ahmet. It's always super helpful. Everyone, feel free to send games. But yeah, I think bishop b5 puts extra pressure on this d7 bishop, and as a result is a positional error because it allows black to move forward. It's a good general idea, but in this case, the defensive resource was there, so it could be played. Anyways, yeah, I mean, the issue is in this particular case, e6 runs into or e6 runs into pawn takes, bishop takes, knight d6, but. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure this is a little bit better, but here knight d6 and black's still positive, yeah. Maybe a little better, but bishop takes f7 was I think the best move here. Yeah. Anyways, thank you very much for sending the game, and yeah, overall I think it's a good general game here. Well played. You had a good tactical attack, and I think with better, basically better tactical play is your #1 priority, Privilo. I think where you play, basically if you play tactics for an hour a day for a month, you will definitely improve, and you'll be kind of on the right track to improve as quickly as possible. That's what I'd recommend. I think that will really help you. And yeah, no, thank you very much for sending it, Privilo, and please, yes. So I think at the end of the day, especially if you're playing instinctive type moves, Privilo, you really need to back that up with good pattern recognition. And I think the best way to do that is probably through like a tactics trainer. There's a few on the Discord that I think are really good, and some of those are free. But I'm super happy to go over your games, and please keep sending them. But I think your quickest way to improve is really to just go through chess tactics. More and more chess tactics that will work. And yeah, thank you very much for sending the game. Thank you very much for being here. And yeah, the instinct is definitely a good part of the game, but yeah, if you are playing instinctually, which you have to sometimes at faster time controls, make sure you have the good tactical background to back that up. Anyways, thank you guys all very much for being here. Thank you for joining the stream. Please send in more games. It's super helpful in terms of me organizing the stream. So on the Discord or wherever, please keep sending them. Yeah, thank you guys very much for being here. Thanks Yeah, thanks for being here. Have a good day. Next stream is at 6:05 p.m. Eastern time, and look forward to seeing you there. Thanks very much. Have a good day. Bye.